I'm Pamela Portnoy, and no one's okay. Okay. Welcome back to No One's Okay. I am back. I am here today with the one, the only, Anthony Reda. It is his third time on the show, and this is our third time trying to get this intro going. Third time's the charm. He's back. I want to sing the Eminem song, but we're not going to because I tried that the first two times, but we're just going to do a little wiggle, a little dance. Welcome back, Anthony.
Yes. It is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Third time's a charm. 3 times is a habit. Not going to kick it. Can I kick it? Yes, you can.
You're literally giving the bullet points of the jokes that we were making in longer form. You're like, yeah, we covered the Eminem dance. We go with the habit. This is what we're doing. Just get it all in. Mm-hmm. We're doing it. Anthony is a host of the Vulnerability Hangover podcast. It's wonderful. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Anthony, we're talking about peace today.
We are talking about peace today. Thank you for the plug as well.
Oh, you're so welcome. Always. We love friends of the pod and our pod friends.
Oh, cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
I know you have a ton of notes, but I wanted to remind our audience before we get into the subject matter. Anthony has previously joined us for our episode on After Some and our episode on Sonder. So,
yes,
peace is today.
Yes, big word guy. Big word guy. Let's dive into words.
Are you doing Wordle, by the way?
Oh, yes. 100% doing Wordle.
Every day?
As many as I remember. And when there are some days where I forget and I'm upset. Yeah.
I am on this text thread with 2 of my friends who live out of state, and we remind each other every day. Like, one of us will pipe up and be like, let's see it, and we send screenshots of our results. But everyone has to be in first because we don't want to send our results unsolicited to ruin what the game could be for the day. So that's totally been the cute thing that we have going. We send each other the screenshots and then we compliment each other on how nice our words are. And I'm like, we're fucking cute to do that.
Yes.
I think
today,
I
kind of want to join that.
You should. I think I got complimented on loams today. Which was not the answer, but it's a guess.
Correct.
Yes.
It is not the answer.
That is not the answer.
I've done it today.
You did it today. Okay, excellent. What were some of your guesses? I know I'm steering this completely off course, but do you remember some of your other guesses?
Wow. I have a strategy where I start every day with the word route because it gets 3 vowels out of the way, and T and R are pretty often used.
That's really smart.
Thank you. And so, to be completely honest, I don't remember off the top of my head what my second guess was, and I got it on the third one. So I don't want to ruin it.
I got it on the 5th. Damn! And today was a hard one.
Nice.
They pulled out a Y today.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah. I usually start with a head. Someone called me out on that today.
That myself.
Say that again.
Oh no! I was just saying I was surprised that I got it in 3. You start with a head. You use double. You have 2 A's in the first one. Wow. Okay. Bold move.
It's funny. I'm kind of a rule breaker because if I, get the yellow square, sometimes I just ignore it because I just want to try it again in different. I'm big on the plural forms of words, and I'm like, let me just try different shit. And I know there's no S in here, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So they call me out on being real stubborn with the letters. Anyway, for all you wordlers out there, there's a really great, hilarious comedic short film on the makers of Wordle. You guys should check it out. I'll send it to you, Anthony, when we're done here.
Thank you.
It's really fun. Peace. Let's get back to it. What do you think of first when you hear the word peace?
Totally. So the first, as I was thinking about this and thinking about what peace means to me and what peace might mean generally, how I think about it, I thought about it in the sense of internal peace and external peace. And so the first thing that I wrote down was externally peace, meaning the removal or the ending of conflict. And that can be either physical or emotional. And it seems like the easiest entry point into peace being the absence of conflict, which, to define a word by what it is not my favorite thing to do, but that was where I started. And I was just sort of thinking, like externally, because I think we all want a sense of peace. I think that is certainly something that I strive for. I think living in turmoil is not the ideal state for anyone. And we do live in unpeaceful times,
Yep.
whether that be around the world or just within ourselves or in social groups or in our communities, what have you. There's a lot of conflict out there. And as I was thinking through peace and what it meant, I thought so externally, like, out in the world. But I was thinking more, and so much of life is our own experience. It's our own perception. So much of it is within ourselves. And so then I was thinking of like, okay, so what is internal peace? And I think we all have an idea of what that feels like. Mm-hmm. But I really wanted to try and narrow it down a little more. And
you just really I wanted to like do a cute callback to what you just said, how you don't like defining a word by what it's not. And I'm like, I wanted to just describe internal peace to you by what it isn't, which is anxiety.
Right.
Yeah, that was like, well, it's not that. If I didn't have that, would that be the feeling of peace?
Right.
But I'm sure there's more to it, obviously, than that. I feel like you can not have anxiety but still not be at peace.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
I don't know quite how, and I kind of want to prove what I'm saying. How do you think that that's possible?
I think that in many ways, anxiety manifests for me in the sense of discomfort with an unknown future. I think anxiety very, very often, if not always, has to do with the future and elements of it that I can't control, and that making me uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you can certainly be in a position where maybe anxiety is a privileged problem to have, because it means that your current state, maybe not always, but your current state is stable enough to where you can freak out about the future.
Yes.
Feel free to contradict that. Well, anxiety is a privileged problem.
Well, it's I don't know if it's accurate in terms of like every definition of privilege, because a lot of people do struggle with it, but also like I've heard anxiety be described as a worry for the future, kind of like the way you just described it, and depression being a worry about the past. And peace or calm or whatever, it's more about focusing on the present.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So what you're saying, I think, makes a lot of sense for sure, because it's like you're not in immediate danger, so you're more concerned about the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that you can definitely, to answer your question, I think if there are very real, visceral, unavoidable traumas or tragedies going on in your present life, I think that you can certainly not be anxious about the future. It certainly does not mean that you're in peace in that moment, and certainly doesn't mean that the future isn't also scary. It just feels like almost overwhelming, to the point of, what I'm experiencing right now in this moment is so big, or feels so big, that I can't even imagine. I can't even think about the future, even in a sense of thinking about it and being scared that it's unknown. It's just all encompassing right now, but it's conflict or it's trauma, and therefore I cannot find peace in it. But I think that the flip of that would be, you would then have to find peace in that present moment. before either the past or the future could open back up to you psychologically.
That's so interesting. So, do you have how do you feel the most at peace? What are you doing when you're at peace?
Yeah. I am most at peace when, just to paint a picture, I call myself an analog person. I try to be away from screens as much as I can in my free time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really feel at peace. I have a record player. I have a pretty bitchin' record collection. I'm
Hell yeah.
like proud of that for sure. Um, and so for me, like, throw the phone in another room, put on a record, cook a meal. It feels very creative, and it's an immediate, you get immediate feedback on if something is good or bad, or if it needs salt, or if it needs something sweet, or how you can, adjust it in some way. You get immediate feedback if what you made is good or not. It's creative in a sense that you get to be a little bit of an artist when you're cooking. And it's something that you make tangibly, which I
And you're
really like. I've been
nourishing
very
yourself
creative.
with it.
And you're nourishing yourself. Exactly. And so if I can do that and then read a book, I am at peace. And that is it's a good indicator of where I'm at emotionally. If, like, how many hours a week do you spend reading, or like how many meals, or like how many nights this week did you cook yourself a meal? Um, you know, not necessarily causation, but certainly correlation on those.
That makes a lot of sense. So you can literally tell, like, based on your screen time and based on like what food you're eating, where your mental health is.
Totally.
Reverse
Yeah.
engineering
It's a
it.
pretty good indicator.
That's fascinating.
Basically, yeah.
I think that's a great answer. Alexa does the same thing, which is one of the things I love about her. Like, she also does the record and the wine that she drinks while she cooks, and I think that's so lovely. And I've been taking to that, even though I'm a terrible cook. But for me, it's more about definitely no screen for a little bit. I noticed that, like, I've been limiting my time on Instagram a little bit, and I've noticed that really helps. I also, the way that you're talking about your cooking and your screen time, it's my alone time. I will tell, you can tell how at peace or not I am depending on how much time I'm spending on my own. Because if I'm not getting any alone time and I'm overbooking myself, I am a nightmare. Absolute, just lost and about to fucking cry at any moment. I think it's just because I like dimming my lights and lighting my candles, and I like listening to music, or just even like sitting and thinking and reading and looking out the window. I just like quiet, and I like being by myself. And I find myself being more crotchety when I'm around sound, which is another thing that's so related to the word peace, because I just want some peace and quiet. It's like attached to the word quiet so much. And I think that's really interesting. Like, it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's something else that I wrote down. This is from Brene Brown, Gifts of Imperfection, which is a book that I love, would recommend to anyone listening.
Amazing.
So Brene Brown's, she's really big on defining words or terms so that you have a conversation, and that everyone involved in the conversation is talking about the same thing, which I think is smart in many ways. And so there are two things as I was going through notes of like books that I've read that may or may not have to do with peace. So there were two words that stuck out there. So one is calm, and the Brene Brown definition of calm in that book is creating perspective and mindfulness while managing emotional reactivity. And I think that's really nice. So again, like creating perspective and mindfulness while managing emotional reactivity. So it's a time of, almost to your point, of some quiet, and calm is the word that she's defining, where you can create a space to reflect a little bit more on your emotional response to things. And the second word is stillness, where she says creating a clearing of emotional clutter-free space and allowing ourselves to feel, think, dream, or question. which I really like that last one, question. Like, I think that's also really important. And well, they're all important, but dream and question are two like beautiful things. We feel a lot, we think a lot kind of by default, but to dream is something that's a little more intentional, and to question is certainly something that's a little more intentional. So I also really like the creating a clearing of emotional clutter-free space, which is kind of a nice image.
What do you think when you hear question in that context? What's the importance of questioning?
I think that the importance of questioning is to maybe I'll use the analogy of maybe sharpening a sword or something like that, where you are holding it up against some sort of alternate idea that may or may not agree completely or disagree completely, but in some way will sharpen a pre a belief that you had beforehand. And unless you question that and do it genuinely and honestly, you will never either have conviction in things that you truly believe, and you might be going around with misinformed ideas, frankly.
Definitely.
If you don't ever question, yeah. If you don't ever question anything, it's you run the risk of holding on to things that do not serve you,
Mm-hmm.
or in the worst case, is not true, things that are not true. And so to question, I think, I think people are afraid of being wrong, quote unquote. But the other side of that coin is that you can never really have a deep sense of conviction about what you believe is right. And so I think questioning is key to that.
And that's interesting because it's there's so many ways, there's so many tangents I want to take right now. What you were saying reminds me of love. On like a lot of people tend to fall victim to external circumstances, um and a lot of the times they are things that could have been prevented by just creating a boundary of like, hey, I'm going to give myself this space, this alone time, this space to question, that all these things that like a human being needs to keep a healthy like mental health. There's responsibility that everyone needs to take for themselves to claim their peace, to claim love, to claim happiness. It's not like something's going to be thrown in your lap. These are all things that you need to work to acquire. Right?
Absolutely. No, 100%. And it was interesting to me when you brought up peace and quiet and the two being together
Yeah.
very often. I had written down that very often we have a verb and then peace. So you're making peace, or you're finding peace, or you're creating peace. And it is very much, it's an action. To your point, it's something to be worked toward, or I don't necessarily want to say earned, but it will not be given. There needs to be effort and intention there. And I think that's something that's crucial as well, and kind of stems from, being able to find internal peace is something that you have to do. No one is going to do it for you, and you're going to have to do it in times that are difficult as well. By its very nature, to make or find peace, you have to be in a time of conflict, and so it's not going to be easy. But the beauty is that it is yours to make and to define, and it is also yours to create and have always. You can have peace with yourself at any time. That is infinitely easier said than done, but it is
100%.
certainly possible. And so I think that's kind of, it's a beautiful challenge almost to live a peaceful life, because
100%.
life itself is not peaceful, but you can live a peaceful life.
I love that. That's beautiful. So, a couple things that I wrote down is I feel like when people use the word peace, it can at times be synonymous, and I mentioned, silence, quiet. It could also be synonymous with stillness, like be at peace. And it could also be synonymous with isolation. And I think of that because it's literally used as a goodbye, peace out. I'm going to peace out. I'm going to leave. And so funny. Like, it's really hard to articulate this subject, but I love that we're trying. I'm trying. You're doing beautifully.
You're also doing beautifully.
It's, we're workshopping it. Thank you. So because I feel like it can be synonymous with isolation a lot, do you think it's possible for there to be just complete peace with more than one person? And that sounds like a ridiculous question, but like there's always like a disturbance in the force. And I'm not necessarily saying that in a negative way, but just because two people are just bringing all of their life and their baggage and their experience and what they're carrying into a room together. And I don't know, if I'm sure there are lots of listeners out here that, and including you, Anthony, like that are full of empathy, very empathetic individuals. And how do you have peace when you're really like trying to listen and trying to like take something on? I feel like peace has to include isolation because of the need for boundaries. That was a long circular walk I just took, but thank you for hanging in with me. No, does that make any sense? What I just said, was that the dumbest thing ever?
No, it was not. It was an intelligent question.
Because
an astute observation.
When you think of peace, like the corny, not corny, beautiful, but like ideas in my head are like people coming together. But when I really sit and think about like being at peace, it's a kind of a solitary endeavor.
I would agree.
I don't know.
I would agree. And to go back to so I feel as though if the more people you invite in, right? So you have your energy, and when no one else is around, then the only potential conflict is internal conflict, which is its own thing. It's its own can of worms. It's hard enough just with yourself, right? But if you can achieve that in any sort of meaningful way for any sort of meaningful amount of time, that feels really good. You want to hold on to that. And anytime that you invite someone else into the room, multiple people into the room, there are touch points, there are conflict points, friction points, maybe more than conflict, but you're going to butt up against each other in one way or another. And I think you're right in that the truest sense of peace and sustainable peace for a long time has to have a sense of isolation. It's probably why monks go into a monastery up on a mountain and don't speak to each other or to anyone.
The funniest thing you just said, because I literally just had like this bout of anxiety a few days ago, and I said to my friend, I'm like, I need to take a vow of silence. Let's like find a cool monastery. And that was like so like not the coolest thing for me to say, but like when I think of peace, I think of isolation like that. 100% I do.
Yeah. And I think that you can achieve a level of peace in isolation that you probably can't, or if you do, it'll be a much more difficult endeavor with other people. I would argue, though, that a life spent devoid of friction points with other people would not be as fulfilling as one with it. And I think that, to your point of needing time alone to recharge and to reclaim that peace, in a sense, is integral to then being able to better navigate friction points with other people. And I think there's also a level of the amount of peace that you have within yourself that you can then bring to a room of people. You'll be able to quickly determine how at peace those other people are with themselves based on the interaction that you have. um i I really believe that, truly.
It just reminds me of how solitary of an experience this is. Yeah, you could be surrounded by people, but you really don't know what other people's points of view truly are. You only have your own to gauge from and what people tell you. But we are here in kind of a solitary experience, and it's funny because I believe in love and I believe in friendship and family and intimacy and relationships. But there is an important part, I think, of like let it live and let live, and you got to take care of you in order to be um a good partner, friend, family member to other people. Like you have to have boundaries. And what you said really reminds me of like there is no light without the darkness. There is no peace without the chaos, because then what does it mean to you? Anyway.
No, I think that's really good. I'm curious. You brought up boundaries a few times,
Yeah.
and I'm curious what your perspective is on how boundaries and peace interact. I believe that they do, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think what was going on at the top of my head when I was talking about that was my own internal calm. I think I have a habit of taking on other people's stuff, other people's fears and anxieties um, as my own sometimes. And sometimes it's very hard to discern. Like if I'm talking about or thinking about something that a friend of mine is going through or a partner of mine is going through, I have to really remind myself, like force myself to remember, like, yes, you can be there for them, but this is their thing. And allow it to kind of penetrate that boundary and affect me and affect my peace just because I want to be a good, partner to them or a good friend to them. That's kind of how I think of it as a boundary.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
What about you?
There's a book somewhere behind me, probably, called Boundaries. And there's an analogy in that book that says a boundary is not necessarily a fence, it's a fence with a gate. And it exists and you can close it at any time. So I'm closing the gate. This is a boundary I've set up. It doesn't necessarily have to be permanent. It could just be that day. Not feeling it? No. And the flip of that is that you can open it, right? And so if you want to let someone in past that fence, you can open that gate, you can open that boundary. But I love that analogy because it puts a lot of, or really all of the locus of control on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it is primarily a fence, which means most of the time it protects whatever is inside, but you have a choice to open it or not. And I think that's a pretty lovely image of what boundaries can be. And certainly pertaining to this conversation, if you have your piece inside your little fence, you can keep that and you close the gate and it's yours. You can recharge it. And then to your point too, of, no light without darkness, no peace without chaos. The chaos is outside of the fence.
Right.
And then you can decide how much of that you want to let in, how much of that you want to interact with, how much of that you want to take. And it's important to remember that you can close it at any time.
Right.
You could be mid-conversation with someone and it is not going in any meaningful, good direction. And you can just say, nope, we don't need to do this. It's not helping you. It's not helping me. I'm not changing your mind. You're not going to change mine. We can just close that and then everything inside is good. So I think certainly boundaries are huge in so many ways, whether you want to call it keeping peace or, keeping your energy your own, or whatever resonates most with you listeners out there. Boundaries are everything.
I agree.
Everything.
And it's really hard to practice that.
Yes.
I was talking to Jason today even about boundaries, and I was he's probably like, yes, you've been talking a lot about boundaries with me lately. I need to put a boundary on the boundary conversation. No, because he's an amazing and insightful person, and so I was asking him some advice about boundaries, and I'm like, well, how do I do it? It's tricky to do without shutting that gate for permanently, I don't ever want, well, there are cases where I want to shut the gate permanently, but in the case that I was speaking to him about, I really don't. But for now, I have to, so that's a really great analogy. That's so fascinating. You kind of sparked my curiosity. When you are in relationships, are you the type of person that when there's an argument, you go for a walk, go your separate ways for a minute, or do you fix it in the moment?
I used to be someone that would continue to try and fix things. I think that comes from, I guess, to take one extra step back. In many ways, I approached relationships in the same way that I approached most other things in my life, which is just to attack it with tenacity until you solve the problem. That does not work in relationship because the person is not a problem to be solved. And an issue they have is not necessarily my problem to solve. So recently, as in the last couple years, I have taken it upon myself to instill, to declare that as a boundary, and also recognize that for myself, if I get worked up, I shut down. I just stop. I don't like arguing in the sense of, as soon as it gets to a point where we're not exchanging ideas and thoughts about a situation and trying to come to a solution, I really have very little interest in the conversation. And so what I used to do is shut down and then not talk, and then kind of just totally ice cold the person. That is not particularly useful or helpful either. So if I ever feel that happening, yeah, I will definitely take a break. Definitely see, hey, can we have 10 minutes and just go into a different room or take a walk or something? And that is hard to do because for certainly at the beginning, even still now, it feels like you're abandoning the situation or you're abandoning the person. And I think it's very clear to, in that moment, say, I need 10 minutes. I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to come back and we're going to continue talking about this, but it's not doing anything for me right now. I am not being the best version of myself or even close to it in this state. I need this 10 minutes to come back to this and approach it as my best self. And I think saying that before, instead of just getting up and walking away, is key. Mm-hmm. As someone who just got up and walked away once and came back and they were like, what the fuck? What do you, I was like, no, it's going to come back the whole time. Well, you could have told me that at some point. So being communicative is key, but yeah, I am definitely a person that now has recognized the value of for myself, bringing the best version of myself to that conflict and being responsible for my own energy that I do bring to it.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
And
quick work. It is practice.
It's hard. And I remember I would feel pressured a lot of the times, and when I was younger and in relationships, I would panic if there needed to be a second, go to our corners, and I would be like, oh my God, they're not gonna come back. I think knowing how to communicate is so important. And also just like, I think I was afraid because maybe I didn't sit so solidly in where I was and where my opinions and what I was feeling was. And I think if I had the capacity, and I hope to do this moving forward, to really express what I need, and if that's half an hour to think it through, great. Because if I'm pressured to like give an answer or to confront it in the moment, I will say something that I don't mean. And I don't mean it like I'll lash out and be mean. I mean like I'm certainly not sure how I'm going to articulate it. And I'm probably going to only mention maybe a fraction of like what the whole problem is. So interesting. What have been some times in your life where you just felt that feeling of peace? I know you mentioned like your mental health is really helped by your cooking and by listening to records, but like, is there if you think in the life of Anthony, there's a moment where you were like, I am at peace, and this is the epitome of me being at peace. Would you be willing to share that?
Absolutely. It involves being near moving water in some way,
Me
whether that be
too.
the ocean. Yes, yes. I have wait, maybe the next one could be water. We can just talk about
Oh, let's
water.
talk about water. I'm down.
um Such a beautiful, powerful, strong, ever-changing, maneuverable, infinite thing. Being by water is very often where I am most at peace. When I lived in Southern California, I would go to the beach and just sit there. I live in Portland, Oregon now. There is a hike that is my favorite. It's not too far of a drive. It's a beautiful walk. It's not particularly strenuous. And you get to the top and you can sit underneath a waterfall kind of behind it. And I always get to the top and I sit there for maybe 20, 25 minutes. I ruin the pictures that everyone tries to take for that 20 minutes. It's just like beautiful waterfall and some guy in like a neon yellow hiking shirt behind.
Just staring
but
at the water.
That's not my problem.
No,
Yeah, like
it's not.
literally just sitting there like a little monk.
It's not your boundary. You have what's called boundaries. It's not your problem.
Exactly. Not my problem. Not my deal.
That's
I
so
hiked here
good.
too. Okay. But being by water, generally being out in some semblance of nature, there's certainly a difference between underwaterfall in the Columbia Gorge and Manhattan Beach, California. But just being out in nature, there's also a sense of feeling kind of small, but being okay with feeling small. We are in the universal scale incredibly small, in a time scale really small, brief. And being present in nature, understanding and accepting, and being in love with the fact that we are brief, small, beautiful beings floating around in space, getting to enjoy this wonderful world, brings me a lot of peace. That is where in the life of Anthony
That's
I am most at
beautiful.
peace.
Yes. I love that so much. And it's very interesting because I have a very similar answer. And I think about this particular moment often because I felt so at peace, so calm on this day. I was at the beach and I was sitting out for the entire afternoon, and I was pretty much by myself the whole time. I had my parents like in and out of the background. And around sunset, all these dolphins started like surfing the waves, basically. And it was like majestic and beautiful to watch. It was kind of like a moment out of a film, but also I can't imagine sitting for hours staring at the waves, staring at the water, and not feeling like you're tiny. And when you feel tiny, your problems just don't seem that important. And I don't mean tiny like insignificant, like it's a problem. I'm saying things are going to keep moving, and so will you. And
Yes.
that brings me a lot of peace. And I remember, like, physically even, I was sitting there and I was like, I must have looked insane, but who cares? I'm doing my peaceful thing. But I was literally like staring at the waves, and I wasn't even on my phone. Like, I didn't want to do anything but just look at the water. And that was just, I felt, I don't want to say numb because that has a negative connotation, but there was a little bit of that. That's kind of the physical feeling for me.
Like that.
Yeah.
Like that a lot.
Amazing. What I know a lot of people have been talking about their comfort shows. Are there any shows that make you that calm you, that make you feel more peaceful when you're needing to?
Oh, the Great British Baking Show is probably
That is a brilliant answer.
Like, if you ever feel anything other than just pretty content with life, if you want to feel just content with life, like things are okay, watch the Great British Baking Show. I remember watching the first, I wasn't into it. My sister turned me on to it. We watched like 3 episodes. I was at her place and I was like, this is cool, but like, what do they win? And she's like, oh, they get like a plate and some flowers. And I was like, hang on. These untrained professionals are coming in making 3-foot high gingerbread sculptures
with like special effects and shit.
Yeah. Like engineering all these insane things that they bake, and it has to taste good too. And they're doing it for a plate and some flowers and the love of baking
and a handshake. Don't forget about the handshake is
and
crucial.
A handshake. And if you're lucky, you get a handshake from Paul Hollywood. And I was like, that's just beautiful. That's just a beautiful. And I love too. And they're like, oh, it's just a bake. Like, it's just, and that's another perspective thing. Like, it's just a bake. It's just like, there are like, unless, I don't know, like if you're like the president, then decisions you make really matter. Most of us, the stuff that we did, like the world's going to keep spinning. It's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world or even close to it. No one's life is in danger with most of our jobs.
Yeah.
Like, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's going to be all right. Show some grace to yourself. So I've watched, I'll watch the Great British Baking Show. That's a good, and Chopped. I love Chopped, but that's almost like for tech, like it's like constant learning about cooking stuff. Like, oh, cool, new technique. Awesome.
That's really cool. Oh, yeah. I love
Chopped is my shit.
I've actually never seen an episode, but I'll have to check it out now. I've watched the Great British Baking Show, and that to me is like, you're watching these lovely people who are all nice to each other bake these amazing cakes, and then they cut to sheep in a field, and I'm just very it's a different world. But like, then you think, does it have to be like, I could feel like this all the time if I really tried, but it is hard. I get that.
It definitely is.
I'm the last person to be like, yeah, you should be able to feel that all the time. No, like I don't feel peace very often. This is all in theory, audience.
We are just talking about ideas.
Yeah, we don't practice these ideas. We're workshopping.
I am a neurotic basket case all the time. I am this close.
This episode. It's this fine. Close. I am chaos personified. It's fine. I love this so much. Legion. Did you have any other thoughts before I move on to the important question?
As I have one final thought, and it is that a sense of peace, as we were talking about, not feeling like our problems were as problematic. I think that as you gain perspective and prioritize the things that are important in your life, it is easier to find peace. And I think that through difficulties and challenges, you gain resilience. And through resilience, you're able to prioritize what is important. And through that, it is easier to find peace. And so perhaps to tie it all back together, maybe with a nice little bow, conflict and moving through that well will give you resilience. And that resilience will allow you to more easily and more accessibly find peace.
When you say that, that's yes, 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 and yes. When you say resilience, how do you picture that? Because when you just said that, it really reminded me of the gate, the with the open door that we're talking about. Resilience, like a buildup of a callus, like a buildup of a gate, it's building on something.
That's a really interesting take and image that I like. For me, I think of resilience as the ability to gracefully move through difficult times. That is what resilience feels like to me. Perhaps not always as you are navigating it, because sometimes it is messy and difficult and ugly. But resilience is coming out of the other side of that with more beauty and grace, and then taking that beauty and grace with you in all the challenges that you will inevitably face in the future.
That's wonderful.
Thanks.
So insightful. Every time you come on this show, my mind explodes.
That was a good one.
I like that little
one.
dance that you just did. Yeah.
I really, it's the journalism major in me that loves, and just like language and communicating generally. Like if you can get something from your head out that is just about exactly what you wanted to convey, it's a fun feeling.
100% it is.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. That was fun.
Good job. I very rarely have that gift, so kind of jealous. And you are what I aspire to be. Excellent. Well done. Anthony.
That's so nice. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Are you okay?
No.
Uh-huh.
I am in many, many ways much more than okay. I'm in many ways thriving.
Fuck yeah.
Yes.
I almost caught myself. I was like, am I allowed to curse? Yes. I've been doing it the whole show. I don't know why I got nervous.
Can I say that? No, so referenced earlier, I live in Portland. I moved here about 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years in a few days. And I finally feel like I am where I wanted to be when I first moved here now. And it took some time and it took work, and there were lots of ups and downs. But I feel really good about the people that I have here, my people, my core group of friends. I feel very good about where I live and what a beautiful place it is. I try to go on walks around my neighborhood, and it is springtime. Things are blooming. It's gorgeous. I grew up in Arizona, which is a desert and nothing grows. And so just to see so many things in bloom and any color that's not some shade of brown is delightful.
Nice.
Yes. And I moved up here not knowing what I would do for work, and I figured it out for the last 2.5 years, but just recently, as of like the beginning of this year, starting a really good job, pays me more than I need to live.
Congratulations.
I guess more than I need to survive and enough to live. Thank you so much.
I remember
And
last time we
so it
talked, you were
feels,
on the hunt.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it anyway, be like, oh, it all works out. Everything's like, it's a lot of it fucking sucked. But it did, where I'm at now feels really good. And I am very, very happy. I am very grateful. I am very appreciative. Life feels very fun. And that feels really good. There's a certain lightness to life in the day to day that has not existed as much in the last, I mean, I would almost say year. And the really the only part that sometimes feels heavy, and as we get a little bit closer, we're less than a month away, and I guess we'll do can I do like a trigger warning, like a heavy
Sure.
topic incoming type thing?
Yeah.
um so my mom passed away almost a year ago. It'll be a year next month.
Wow.
And feeling as light and content and satisfied with where I am feels really, really good. There is certainly a part of me that wants to be able to share that and wishes that I could share that with my mom for a extra reason, because she was such a supporter and encourager in the times that were not like this,
Mm-hmm.
that it feels very much like I made it, and I wish that I could share that. That would be wonderful. So no, I am not okay. We're working through that on a day-to-day basis, and that is hard and difficult. That puts a lot of things in perspective. In some ways, I think that experience is, I mean, to the point of, challenge, giving you resilience, giving you the ability to find peace and perspective and then find peace. I would not wish that loss or the feeling of that loss on anyone. I would also say that I truly believe that experiencing something like that puts a lot of things into perspective. And there are a lot of things in life that I thought were important that really aren't that important. And there are some things that I thought were important that I now realize are integral
Mm-hmm.
to a good life.
Absolutely. Um, Thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, I I can't believe it's almost been a year. And I'm so I imagine it's a tough time, when that year is coming up. And from the little that you told me about your relationship, I just want to say I'm sure she would not be surprised that you're doing well.
No, not at
I'm
all.
sure she was 100% certain that you would be happy and it would all work out.
She was. She was. When I was not, especially when I was not, she was like, "You got it. You're gonna be good." So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So I'm sure she
And
knows.
I would also, she knows. She knows. And also thank you for the support that you gave during that time.
I
Off
there's
camera, off screen, off mic. It
honestly,
was truly, I mean, there's a very real appreciation for you as a human, as a kind and compassionate
right back
woman.
at you.
That yeah, it's yeah, you're lovely. So thank you.
Right back at you, Anthony. And I'm so glad you're doing more than okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crushing it.
Thank you so much for
Crushing it.
joining me again today.
You're very
I hope
welcome.
this
Thank
won't
you
be
for
the
having me.
last time. I hope you'll agree to a fourth and maybe we'll do
I'll do
water.
it.
Let's do water.
Let's
Everyone's
do
like, what are
for
they
acid.
about to do? Are you ready to do that now?
I'm out
Should we
on
do
that
that
one.
right now?
Let's do it now. Let's do it now.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Where can our listeners follow you in case they haven't heard your episode in a while?
Yeah, you can look up Vulnerability Hangover Season 1 is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. We have an Instagram page as well. You can also find me. I'm Anthony Reda, Anthony J. Reda on most social media platforms. The J is, I don't know, important to finding me easier, I guess.
Excellent.
That's where you can find me. Yeah.
Do people call you AJ ever?
There are people that call me AJ.
Really?
People that call me AJ, JJ. Yeah, it's a fun one. I have 2 middle names. Both of them start with J.
Really?
It's a whole thing.
AJJ.
Yeah. AJJ.
AJJ.
AJJ. AJJ.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anthony.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
We will see you guys next time. Bye. This podcast was produced by Jason Crow and me, Pamela Portnoy, with music by Jordan Ross Weinhold. You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at No One's Okay, and please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We love kind reviews. No One's Okay is also on YouTube, so if you want to see our faces, please subscribe to our channel. An extra special thank you goes out to Sean Moore, Claire Palmer, Jackson Palmer, Tiffany Haymoff, and Alexa Marie Anderson. This podcast was recorded at Soundworks Studios. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.